quite amazing to hear that piece for me. And my friend Richard Einhorn, the composer, is here today. I'm very grateful to him for that. I'm grateful to our music team, our choir and leaders of our music for performing it so beautifully. A man ran across the freeway in the middle of the night to bring a woman back to safety after a car accident that likely would have killed her. Abigail Marsh was 19 years old. She was driving back home to Tacoma, Washington, when she saw a little dog jump in front of her on the highway. And she did exactly what you're not supposed to do. She swerved to avoid it. And sadly, she hit it anyway. It sent her car into a tailspin across 4 lanes of the freeway, and she landed facing the wrong direction in the fast lane. Her engine died, and she thought, of course, in her panic and being stunned, that she too would die. The man who saved her must have made a split-second decision to stop his car when he saw her spinning, run across 4 lanes of traffic in the dark, get into her car, start it working again, and drive her to the side of the road to safety. As soon as he was sure she was okay, he drove off. He never gave her his name. She has no idea who it was. This happened 30 years ago, and Marsh is now a professor of psychology and neuroscience who specializes in research on altruism. If I had driven past Abigail Marsh's car that night, seeing it face backwards in the fast lane, I would have shuddered with fear and with grief for whoever was inevitably going to be killed or injured in the impending collision. It would never have occurred to me that I could do anything to help. So what about this man made him stop instantaneously and risk his own life to save her life and the lives of anyone else who may have come along and collided with her car? According to Marsh's research at her lab at Georgetown, this man probably had an unusually large amygdala. That's the part of our brains that regulates our emotions. And she calls these people extreme altruists. Buddhist monk Venerable Matthieu Ricard writes about these extreme altruists in his book, Altruism: The Power of Compassion to Change Yourself and the World. This book is the subject of an online program I lead on Thursdays at 10 a.m. here at All Souls, and about 60 of us attend the sessions to develop a deeper understanding of how to cultivate our own capacity for altruism and how to relieve the suffering of ourselves and of others. Here's the book. You don't even have to read it. Some people just show up, and we practice together and learn together and share our thoughts. You're all welcome. We're only on chapter 13, and you can imagine how many there are. And a handful of those people are here today. Maybe raise your hands so you can ask them if you're interested about the program. Not only did Marsh's rescuer have an extraordinary impulse to do something to help, but he must have been hyper alert in the first place to catch the scenario and stop so fast. And when we hear stories like this, they're so uplifting and inspiring. But for most of us, this kind of heroism is out of our league. How I wish I had what it takes to save people in those sorts of situations, but I don't. And yet, there is opportunity for kindness of all shapes and sizes, and they don't have to be life-saving to make a big impact on us. We know that. We know from our own experience as recipients of acts of altruism. Take a moment now to close your eyes if you're comfortable, and remember a time someone helped you unexpectedly. Maybe you were sick and somebody brought you food or flowers or something to soothe you. Maybe somebody went way out of their way to give you a ride. Maybe you were walking along and you dropped something valuable without realizing it, and somebody came from behind and handed it to you. Play this scene out in your mind. Feel it. Feel what it's like to receive that kindness. Feel it in your heart and in your body. Open your eyes. We know that when we're on the receiving end of an altruistic gesture, we feel more connected, more hopeful, stronger. One of the ways we can generate more kindness in our lives is to remind ourselves of these moments, of these experiences of receiving kindness. This motivates us to act altruistically. Venerable Mathieu Ricard refers to the banality of good, which he defines as the 1,001 expressions of solidarity, consideration, and involvement in favor of others' good, which punctuate our daily lives and exercise a considerable influence on our quality of life. Goodness pervades a society through small acts of kindness and generosity, and through small acts of subversion and resistance and protest. Millions of tiny yeses and millions of tiny nos in the direction of good. And when we do good, it proliferates in our own minds. Others see it, and they're inspired by it too. Another way we can cultivate deeper and more pervasive altruism is by gentle reflection on our past actions when we've missed opportunities to be kind. These are reflections for the sake of illumination, not guilt. Writer George Saunders calls these missed opportunities failures of kindness. In his 2013 convocation speech at Syracuse University, he told a story from 42 years earlier. He said, "In 7th grade, this new kid joined our class. In the interest of confidentiality, her convocation speech name will be Ellen. Ellen was small and shy. She wore these blue cat's eye glasses that only old ladies wore back then. When nervous, which was pretty much all the time, she had a habit of taking a strand of hair in her mouth and chewing on it. So she came to our school and to our neighborhood and was mostly ignored, occasionally teased. Hair tastes good, Ellen, stuff like that. I could see this hurt her. I still remember the way she'd look after such an insult. Eyes cast down, a little gut kicked, as if, having just been reminded of her place in the world, she was trying as much as possible to disappear. After a while, she'd drift away, hair strand still in her mouth. At home, I imagined after school, her mother would say, 'How was your day, sweetie?' And she would say, 'Oh, fine.' And her mother would say, 'Making new friends?' And she'd go, 'Sure, lots.' Sometimes I'd see her hanging around alone in her front yard, almost afraid to leave it. And then they moved. No tragedy, no big final hazing. One day she was there, and the next day she wasn't. End of story. Can you think of Ellens in your past? Can you think of when you've been an Ellen? By reflecting on our connection to Ellen, we can feel the potential of contributing to a banality of good. We don't need an oversized amygdala or first responder training. We just need to pay attention. Recently, I was on the 6 train, and a boy about 10 years old was casually walking back and forth the length of the train. He was eating a piece of cake. I was half looking at my phone, half thinking about when my own children enjoyed being independent from me on the train and would walk away a little bit. I looked for the child's parents, but the train was crowded. I didn't spot them. I went back to my phone. At the next stop, I vaguely noticed out of the corner of my eye that the boy got off the train. And as the doors shut and I remained on the train, the woman next to me pointed out that the child was screaming, looking for his parents. I was horrified that I hadn't paid attention to the small feeling in me that something was awry with this child. It was too late. The doors had slammed shut, and the train was moving into the tunnel. I could not get back to him. I made a mistake. I'm not beating myself up. I'm pretty sure someone kind helped him. But the experience made a very strong impression on me, and I intentionally reflect on it to keep it alive in me. George Saunders is doing the same with his Ellen story. It helps us stay attentive so we minimize failures of kindness. And when we reflect on kindness, keeping it in the front of our minds, when an altruistic opportunity arises, we're less likely to be distracted by bias. For example, if you want to contribute to the banality of good and you're actively cultivating a wish to make many acts of kindness, you're likely to let someone in front of you in traffic, regardless of their brand of car or their bumper stickers. And the bottom line is that's what shifts us all toward a better quality of social life. The banality of good is simple. If someone falls on the sidewalk and needs a hand, we don't first wonder about their past misdeeds or their views on gun control. We simply consider that they're human and they need a hand, and we pull them up. In 2020, Unitarian Universalist grandparents of a friend of mine were living in the rural South. They were struggling to remain independent. During the election, they and their younger neighbors next door had dueling signs in their yards, supporting opposing presidential candidates. Then the pandemic hit and left the grandparents stranded with no way to get their needs met. Maybe the neighbors didn't bat an eye before they walked over there and asked for the grandparents' grocery list. Or maybe they debated at the kitchen table for hours about what to do and concluded this was the right thing to do. And they held their breath while they walked by the sign in the grandparents' yard. These neighbors purchased and delivered all of the grandparents' groceries and medicine, traversing between the two yards and the two signs day after day. Some acts of kindness are easy for us and challenging for others, or the other way around. Maybe it's straightforward to you that you'll visit a friend who is dying because they're isolated and afraid. Or maybe you have no idea how to behave, so it's really difficult. Maybe you go into high alert when you see a child on the train and you would never make the mistake that I made. The banality of good, the 1,001 expressions of solidarity, consideration, and involvement in favor of others' good, is not only pro-social, but it brightens our minds, it brightens our hearts. Our acts of kindness, whether they are easy or difficult, shift us all in the direction of good. Some of the most rewarding acts of altruism don't depend on our individual efforts or responses, thankfully. We're prompted into them because we find ourselves accomplishing something in solidarity that we could never do alone. A few years ago in Panama City, Florida, a couple of boys ages 8 and 11 were stuck in a riptide. Their mom saw them struggling and she swam out to help them, and she too got stuck in the riptide. 7 more family members went out to rescue the family members that were already there, and they all got pulled away from the beach. People started to notice. They looked on in horror, frozen, wanting to help but scared, unsure what to do. One man who noticed the people drowning started yelling, "Hold hands, form a human chain." He remarked later, if you know about ants, you know when one's in trouble, they form a chain to help. My theory was, let's get enough people, we'll get out there and we'll pull them in. 5 people joined hands. And then locals and tourists, people who didn't speak English, people who didn't know how to swim. They created a chain of 70 people to go out away from the beach to rescue these people. But still, they could not reach the family. One brave and confident swimmer with a boogie board swam out to the family and rescued them one by one. She put them onto the boogie board and she pulled it over to the long chain, and each of them pulled these people back to shore. Every single member of the family was saved.
Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were?
So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money.
For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you.
Remember? Amen. Peace be with you.